Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. As injuries were mounting, negativity was piling up. The Wolves delivered their biggest comeback in 12 years. We'll talk about that and this current road trip and the injury situations on the Minnesota basketball party.
This is Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Timberwolves talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota basketball party on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Wolves talk every Wednesday on the Minnesota basketball party on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Welcome in, everyone. We're really glad you've joined us here, watching us on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Get us to our next 1,000. I think we just hit 7,000 subscribers. Now we're on the march to 8. You can also listen to us on the Locked On Wolves audio feed, where Ben Beacon hosts the daily Locked On Wolves show. You can get us on Amazon Fire, Roku, Sirius XM app. Lots of ways to watch and listen to Locked On Sports Minnesota. We are presented today by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. The Wolves come from 22 down in LA to beat the Clippers and pull within a half game of the Western Conference lead. Since we last did a show, Karl-Anthony Towns is out with a meniscus tear. He had surgery yesterday. What are the ramifications on the Wolves' postseason hopes and seeding hopes in the Western Conference? Rudy Gobert flashing money signs. We have so much to get to after a very eventful week in Wolves land, but let's meet today's crew with our opening tip.
Reggie Wilson, sports director at Care 11. And no, he didn't. Yes, he did. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, big time play yesterday.
I'm Ben Beacon, host of the daily Locked On Wolves podcast, and we're going to talk about the Clippers, the win over the Clippers on Tuesday night, and really how that kind of flips the way I'm looking at this road trip so far for Minnesota.
I'm Jack Borman, editor-in-chief of Canis Hoopus, co-host of the Locked On Wolves postcast with my man Luke Inman. And I'm going to talk about why Chris Finch might be onto something with starting Nickeil Alexander-Walker over Kyle Anderson off the top of the second half last night.
And I'm Ron Johnson, former Gophers and NFL wide receiver, but avid basketball fan. Also the host of the Ron Johnson Show on Locked On Sports Minnesota and frequent of the football party. But hey, basketball is my first love. And we got to talk about this. We're going to talk about why doves cry, because there's a reason. And I think all Minnesotans know.
I might have seen the tweet come from @3Ron Johnson last night. Before we dive into the Clippers game, because I know that this was a big topic last Wednesday. Ron, do you have anything to say to Reggie after Sunday's result, Lakers over Wolves? Is there anything that you guys need to sort out amongst yourselves?
Yeah, the Lakers are the 9th seed, so they're going to get 9th seed love. Congratulations on your in-season tournament championship, and congratulations on beating the number 1 team in the NBA. Yay!
That's it. That's all you got.
That's all I got. Yay, wow. Lakers. Yay.
Wow. You know what? I'll accept it. Why not?
Okay, we're all friends. Look at this. Little
Actually, I'll say this. I will say this. I'd rather play the Warriors now than the Lakers. How about that, Reggie?
Thank you. Thank you.
That's fair. That's a big admission. Very big of you, Ron. Let's talk Clippers game. T-Wolves go in 2-game losing streak. They fall behind by 22. They don't have Monte Morris. They don't have Cat. Kyle Anderson's back off an injury. Rudy Gobert's been dealing with hamstring stuff. And they're down 22. Kawhi gets hurt. Kawhi goes out, and the Wolves from that point on outscore the Clippers essentially by 40. And the Wolves go on a tear. Now, I don't know if this is searchable. I don't know if we can find the historical context for this. The Wolves hit 14 shots in a row between the end of the third and the first 13 shots of the fourth quarter. That's insanity. Hot as a blowtorch. and they pulled away and made it a laugher at the end. We got, Luka Garza time, Leonard Miller time. That's the kind of game it turned into for the Wolves. Reggie Wilson, where did this come from? This biggest comeback since 2012 for the Timberwolves.
You said hot as a blowtorch. Where I come from, we would say hotter than fish grease. Like it was that. It's tough, man, because with Kawhi going out, I really would have liked to have seen how the game goes if Kawhi stays. And it just looked like a kind of a freak thing with the back just kind of tightening up on him, and he's just like, you know what? I'm leaving. I'm gone. I'm out of here. And that was a very weird but very on-brand Kawhi thing to happen. But still can't take anything away from the Wolves. When Cat went down, you're like, okay, this is Ant's chance to really step up, put the team on his back, score 40 a game, and really kind of propel the Wolves to victory. And, that first game against Indiana is like, okay, all right, I can see the vision. And then they dropped 2 with the Lakers, Ron, and the Cavs, and you're like, well, I don't know. It just kind of looks a little different. But yesterday was a very, very important game, I would say. I think it was important for confidence. Yes, no Kawhi, but down 22, we all know that the NBA constantly is a game of runs. We've seen it for years now that the team that can withstand the runs or the team that could go on runs, they usually have the most success. And the Wolves' run yesterday was pretty incredible. I have no idea, and neither do Wolves fans, what Chris Finch's allegiance is to Kyle Anderson and why he just continues to throw out that lineup with slow-mo out there. Fans are like pulling out their hair about it. But, shout out to Nickeil. Nickeil Alexander-Walker comes out and he's on fire. And he plays with this confidence and reckless abandon that really just like gets it shows why the Wolves paid him in the offseason, because he is a very valuable piece to the team and he's just continued to ascend during his time there. And that was probably the best game that he's ever had as a Minnesota Timberwolf. And so you combine that with Ant's play, especially when you're not getting anything offensively from Jaden McDaniels, which just continues to be bizarre because I feel like you wanted to see the continual rise of him being like that lockdown 3-and-D person, but it's just not necessarily clicking as maybe you thought it would. But that was an impressive win. Even without Kawhi, I just thought that was a win that they could grow on and a win that could give them confidence moving on this road trip.
Mm-hmm. And Beacon.
Yeah, I mean, Reggie mentioned the Nickeil and Kyle Anderson thing. I think one of the main things that happened in the middle of this game was the tweak in terms of the lineup. In the second quarter, obviously the Wolves were down 22. They made that big, I think it was 20-2 run in the second quarter. And Jordan McLaughlin was a big part of that. Ant was obviously a big part of it. Nickeil was a big part of it. It was just this onslaught and forced Ty Lue to call a timeout in the final minute of the first half. Wolves are down 8 at halftime. Then they come out of halftime. Ant was late coming out of the locker room, which apparently is now a thing, and just kind of a fun thing. I don't know. It's no different than him taking a rest in the middle of a quarter, right? It's a little not great at the start of the game. I don't care if it's out of halftime. I think it's just kind of funny. And so then once he gets back to the floor, they leave Alexander on the floor and take off Kyle Anderson. And that likely means that was the plan all along, was to start the second half with slow-mo on the bench and Alexander Walker in the game, go a little bit smaller. And it's funny because last year, and Jack and I talked about this a little bit on the postcast last night, that last year Kyle Anderson mostly played the 4 and Jaden McDaniels mostly played the 3 because of the Towns injury. And now this year, those guys each got, bumped a bit McDaniels is still mostly playing the 3, but Kyle Anderson playing the 3. And then McDaniels, I was worried about him having to play more at the 4 because he hasn't played much for the last couple of years, asking him to rebound when other things aren't going well for him. But depending on the matchup and how the game is going, against a team like the Clippers, you can do that. And you also, the other layer to this is if McDaniels is going to be a non-shooter, and he shot 40% from the field or from 3-point range last year. This year, he was 35% coming into this game, and he's missed like his last 11 or 12 threes. And he's effectively a non-shooter when he's playing like this. And you can't have Rudy, Slow-Mo, and Jaden McDaniels all on the floor together with no shooting. Last year, the spacing worked better because Slow-Mo was 40% from three on low volume, but he was at least confident and shooting 40% from the corners. McDaniels was confident, shooting well. And now you've got this issue where if neither of those guys are going to be actual shooters, now Mike Conley's the only guy on the floor then with Anthony Edwards that can space the floor. And so you've got to mix things up a little bit. And Alexander Walker did that to the extreme in this game by just getting extremely hot, made 5 threes. And we also saw, Mike Conley do the same as well as the game wore on. He was really, really effective too. Each of those guys scoring 20 plus. Jack and I noticed this when we were recording last night that this was, I think the most shots Conley's ever attempted in a Timberwolves uniform was in this game, certainly the most this season. And the Wolves have only lost 4 games all season when Conley scores in double figures. And the last time they lost a game with him scoring double figures was December 26th against OKC. So Conley and Alexander Walker were massive in this game. And the lineup tweak by Chris Finch was definitely a huge part of that.
Jack, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to also talk about the Kyle Anderson change, but I'll start off by just saying, I mean, the Wolves have won the 2 games in LA this season by a combined 39 points, and the Clippers' offensive rating this year is 4th in the NBA at 118.8, and their offensive rating against the Timberwolves this season in 4 games is 105.6, which would be the worst in the entire league. And so for people curious about why Chris Finch has a love affair for Kyle Anderson, it's because he's a really, important defender at 6'9", 230 pounds, who can switch, who can stand up guys like Kawhi Leonard and Zion and those types of players. And he's a very good isolation defender. And even though, he's been playing out of position, like Ben noted, he still found ways to be effective. And last night it was important because he was mostly playing point guard in the minutes that he was not out there with Rudy Gobert. And I think that that's going to continue to be a really important thing, especially if you start Nickeil Alexander-Walker, just because it balances out the spacing on the floor, right? I mean, Chris Finch, like Ben said, started Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the second half, kept him out there for Kyle Anderson. Every single lineup that the Wolves had in the second half, except for one, was a positive plus minus while they were out there on the floor. And Slow-Mo was a minus 18 in the first half, playing most of his minutes with Gobert. And then he was a plus 25 in the second half. And I think you can say, oh, well, that's easy because they were going on runs. But he was a really important part of it. I mean, he had 7 assists. He had 6 in the second half, and he had 0 turnovers, mostly playing the point guard. It's a lot harder for teams to sag off of him when he's playing point guard. I mean, you think about what teams do with Draymond Green and the Warriors is that, if he's in 2-man action or he's playing, the handoff game with Anthony Edwards or Naz Reid or Mike Conley or Nickeil, and those guys come around the handoff and are open, they're going to have a wider than wide open shot. And so the more that he's able to play point guard and play on the ball rather than just standing in the corner and letting that low man in the corner just sink into the paint and completely clog up the spacing, he's going to be way more impactful with the ball in his hands. And you want to look at and playing him more at the 4 with Naz out there at the 5, at least defensively, has been really good this season. That lineup is a plus 6.2, which is in the 82nd percentile league wide. And that offense has an offensive rating of about 114 compared to about 109.5 in just the Rudy and Kyle pairing without one of Naz or Karl on the floor. And I think, too, another thing we saw that was a small byproduct of Kyle playing more of the point guard was that you saw Mike Conley was able to play off the ball. And I think the more that you can get Mike Conley off the ball, the more you can unlock some catch and shoot opportunities for him. And the more you can kind of scale up his scoring a little bit, if you will. And
yeah, still trying to piece together the puzzle without Cat here since the meniscus injury. Ron Johnson, Doves were crying on your X account last night when Rudy Gobert clutched his chest. How we doing with all that?
Yeah, I mean, Doves are still crying. But I think for Minnesotans, like, we never understood the song Prince, or me not being from Minnesota, I never understood the Prince song. I didn't know why Doves cry, but now I do. If you have to live through this sports world of Minnesota sports, Gary Anderson missing field goals, Adrian Peterson tearing his ACL, Brett Favre throwing it back across his body. I mean, there's just so many things where you could say, what in the world? And then Kirk Cousins. I mean, let's add that to the list. Tearing his Achilles on one of his best seasons or starts, in his career to have a 4,000, maybe 5,000 yard season. Then you got Karl-Anthony Towns go down. You're like, okay, we'll be all right. Then you have Rudy Gobert go down. So not only do you not have a big three anymore, now you just have potentially Jaden McDaniels, Kyle Anderson, Anthony Edwards, which is a lot, Mike Conley, and then Nah. And then you got Naz Reid coming in off the bench. You got Jordan McLaughlin. By the way, one of the weirdest Jordan McLaughlin plays for me was the end of, I think, the second quarter where they passed him the ball and he passed up a wide open shot and dribbled and the clock ran out. Like, I don't know if that was second or third quarter. So very weird. I mean, I don't know if he doesn't have a jumper, but if you're in the NBA and you can't shoot a mid-range jump shot, you need to just put your shoes on the court and walk off. Like, he's got to know where he's at in the clock. Now, again, it didn't matter in the end because they won by 18, but little plays like that shows me why he probably shouldn't be on the court when it matters like that, because he has no idea what's going on. Is he a good player in between and doing all the defensive stuff and moving the ball around? Yeah, you have to give him some key minutes in there. But I think that's going to be the key down the stretch is if Rudy Gobert is out for multiple games, it looked like like either a pulled muscle or something in his chest, because the way he kind of fell, it was like he had to clutch and then he fell back kind of hard and he had to grab himself. So it could have been like a bruise, could have been like a pulled muscle, whatever it wasn't good, because when they passed him the ball, he couldn't raise his hand up to get the ball in the post. And so that's why doves cry in Minnesota, because right when you think you're the number one team, we're going to take it away from you. We're going to make you guys sweat. And now the way the playoffs sit, they might have to play the Suns. And now you got the Suns versus the Timberwolves. And honestly, wait, is it the Suns? Yeah, it will be the Suns.
Whoever's 6.
Yeah, Suns. And so when you look at Devin Booker, can Anthony Edwards with Kyle Anderson all defend him? Probably. But you still got a killer over there that's 6'9", and he's a slim thug reaper. It's tough to deal with Kevin Garnett or Kevin Durant. But for this team, my first reaction to the Clippers game, Anthony Edwards is a star. I think we knew that, but now he's showing it every game. The other thing was, I don't know if you guys knew, Kay Adams said she was going to the Clippers Timberwolves game. I think Anthony Edwards looked over, saw her, and said, you know what, I'm going to send her the video, because he went off. He was taking over the game at points where you could see when Paul George would hit a shot on him, he looked like, oh, okay, all right, give me the ball. And he would just go at him. And his ability to get to his spot, his ability to Euro and slow the game down and then speed it back up, his ability to get to the cup and use the backboard as a defender or as a that can't defend, because the bigs can't reach under the rim to block his shot. So the rim becomes another protector of his layup. So he's just smart, he's savvy, and then his mid range is pretty on point. His 3-point shot, if he's in motion, it's good. But that mid range, I mean, it's Michael Jordan-esque. He doesn't miss when you can see him cross, and it's coming, and they just can't, because if they overplay the jumper, he's going back the other way and laying it up. But it was good to see. I mean, you did see Paul George and James Harden. I agree. I would have liked to see the game finish with Kawhi, and if the Timberwolves could have climbed back if Kawhi was still there. But they said he already had back issues and he was trying to push through, and it just didn't work for him. That improves another reason. If you watch him walk out and then get dressed and then walk out the stadium, he's an NPC. He literally, I think somebody just plugs him in and says, you just go walk around and be a part of this game, but you don't have any lines, because he doesn't do anything or say anything. He's just out there. And then he put his jean jacket on and just walks out the state. Doesn't he want to sit down with his teammates and watch? He's just out. All right, I'm gonna go home. Yeah, I'm gonna head out. Y'all take care of this. Or I told my daughter, maybe he's running to the doctor or somewhere, or a hospital to get it looked at, or whatever whoever his specialist is for his back. My guess is he went to do that, to get some treatment, do some stuff for his back, and say I gotta try to get back. But the fact that they're a 3 seed, they're a half game back from the Nuggets and the Thunder, and they've played one additional game than them. So those two teams still have to play to have the same number of games played as the Timberwolves. So if they both lose, then they're all tied for first place, which could happen in their next games.
Yeah, well, it's 3 teams within half a game atop the West. Rudy with the injury even if he plays against Utah, which I think if he can play, he will play against his former team in those 2 games. But it feels like Rudy is dealing with the attrition right now. He's got this chest injury, hamstring, ankle. There's a bevy of things afflicting Rudy. And we saw how he loses his impactfulness last year when he's not playing healthy. And I think that's the worry here with Rudy is that, okay, it might not be a season-ending deal. It might not be a long-term deal, but it's another little thing that's going to bother him and maybe reduce his effectiveness. There's a bigger injury, though, Karl-Anthony Towns. We'll talk about the biggest ripple effects of his injury next on the Minnesota Basketball Party, which is presented by eBay Motors today. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Karl-Anthony Towns had meniscus surgery yesterday. He is out likely for the rest of the regular season. I did the calendar math on this. Playoffs start about 5.5 weeks after yesterday's surgery. So that's the amount of time that Karl-Anthony Towns has if he wants to get back for the start of the playoffs. He'll be reevaluated in 4 weeks. That'd be an optimistic timeline. I think last year's return from his 50 missed games is a little encouraging to me for Cat because he came back from a long layoff and he shot 47% from three. He averaged 21 points in his final 8 games of last season. So he does have the ability to come back and immediately contribute. But will it be a rushed situation? Will he not be 100%? There are concerns certainly with this injury and with this return. But in the meantime, how do the Wolves survive and continue to try to battle for the Western Conference title without him? Let's start with Ben Beacon.
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest concern would be offensive versatility. I mean, we're talking about a team that has been middle of the pack at best offensively all season. I mean, kind of has languished around the 20th best offense and got up to about 15th, I think, at one point on cleaning the glass. And then you're taking away their most efficient offensive player. I mean, you know, Anthony Edwards is their most talented offensive player. There's no question, but Cat's their most efficient offensive player, and he's versatile in that he can be a movement shooter. He can be you can run the offense through him. You could post him up. You could do anything with Karl-Anthony Towns, and they didn't figure it out with him. And so I think it's pretty unlikely their offense will be better without him. And that's the biggest concern. And then the reintegration part when he does come back, which was okay last year, but tough to do on the fly. I have greater hope for it this year simply because they played 60 games together already, Cat and Rudy and the whole team. But it's still going to be tricky to do that on the fly, probably in the playoffs. I just think Ant is going to do what Ant does. And yeah, his volume is going to go up, but we're naturally going to see volume go up for Mike Conley. We're going to see volume go up for Jaden McDaniels. We're going to see the volume go up for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Naz Reid to me is the biggest one, even if he's not starting. And I tend to agree with Jack. I think eventually they'll start Nickeil Alexander-Walker, depending on the matchup, maybe, and still bring Naz off the bench and bring Kyle Anderson off the bench. Naz is going to be the one. He's like the only one of all the guys I just listed that can come on the floor and effectively create his own offense in the same way that Cat would. In a perfect world, the Wolves would be running sets more frequently, and they would be using Anthony Edwards in spread pick and roll with Rudy, using Rudy's gravity to draw guys away from Alexander Walker or Mike Conley, allow them to be spot-up shooters. That's the best case scenario, but there's going to be a time and a place when that doesn't work, and we've already seen that over the past few games. And then you need somebody like Naz who can come in and just score. We saw that on Sunday. He only scored 6 points, didn't make a three-pointer on Tuesday's game, and that it worked out okay because Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Anthony Edwards went off. I think my concern is they can only play a couple of different ways now, and it's basically spread pick and roll anti-isolation and then whatever Naz can give you. Whereas with Cat, you could do a number of different things. And certainly we can criticize, especially early in the year, the Wolves weren't super creative offensively, and they ran into these periods where they just weren't creative at all. But it at least takes away the option to be more creative because you lose Karl-Anthony Towns. I think for the most part, like the schedule's tough, back-to-backs. They played Denver 3 times. I get it. I think they'll be all right from a maybe a little better than 500 ball the rest of the way perspective. I think is probably a good goal to shoot for.
I think for me, it's all going to, come down to how they're going to shoot the three and whether Jaden McDaniels is going to be able to be more effective, right? I mean, the Timberwolves on the season are shooting 38.5%, which is fourth now in the NBA. But since Karl went out, they're 43 of 134. That's 32%. That's 25th in the league in that span. So that's something that they've really struggled with. And Jaden McDaniels has been right there. I mean, we've seen that Naz Reid is up to the task. We've seen that Nickeil Alexander is up to the task of raising their level and raising their game without Karl. Both those guys their scoring is way up from where it is, in games without Karl. And then for Jaden, I mean, Jaden was the only rotation player who had a negative plus minus last night, which was almost legitimately hard to do with that 40-point turnaround. He's had a plus minus of -8 or worse in 4 of the last 5 games. And since Karl-Anthony Towns left the rotation, Jaden is actually averaging less points per game. He's averaging just 8.5 points per game. He's shooting 32.5% from the floor and just 14% from threes, 2 of 14 from 3. And Jaden is taking 2.4 more shots per game with Karl out than with Karl in. Yet his scoring is down. And for reference, Naz Reid is also seeing about 2.5 more shots a game, yet his points per game number is up 5.5. If that gives you any indication of just how much Jaden is really struggling to scale his game up. And I think too, I mean, it made sense, when you look at the numbers for this entire season, you look at the lineup data and you see what the Timberwolves net rating is with both Jaden and Karl on the floor this year. It's a plus 8.8. And when you look at the Timberwolves net rating, when Jaden is on the floor and Karl is off the floor, it's a minus 4.6. So that is a swing of about 13.5 points per 100 possessions, which is pretty important. And Jaden really likes to cut off of Karl-Anthony Towns post up. So that's, 4 or 6 points a game that he's not getting right now. And he's really struggling to impact the game as a scorer when his shot's not falling. And you can just tell that he has no confidence in that jump shot whatsoever. I think he's 0 of 9 from 3 in the Timberwolves' last 2 games. And when his jump shot isn't falling, he's just not going to have the confidence to create off the dribble and get all the way to the rim. And for him, I mean, he's just got to hope that, the Timberwolves can continue to get out and run, and he can really benefit from that as a guy who has really been an excellent transition finisher for the majority of his career. And I think, the more the Timberwolves can lean into transition scoring, trying to play a little bit more aggressively defensively to force some turnovers to get out and run. And then too, also hit the offensive glass is something that we saw them do really well last night. I mean, yes, they had 27 fast break points, which is the second most they've had in a game this season. But for the Timberwolves to hit the offensive glass the way that they did, I want to say they had like 18 offensive rebounds last night is a tremendous number for them. And so I think, like Ben mentioned, their pick and roll frequency is going to go way up, and we might see some more ball movement as a result of that. Get the ball to the corner and kind of get the ball swinging in rotation, which should create either continue to create open threes for Jaden McDaniels or opportunities for him to attack off the catch. But I forget who said that, they may start treating him as a non-shooter if he's going to continue to shoot like this. And so, I think it's really going to hinge upon whether Jaden McDaniels can at least knock down, 2 a game or something like that. Because that's 6 points that they don't have right now. And that would go a long way and at least replacing some of what they're losing with Karl, and at least take a little bit more pressure off of, guys like Ant and Naz and even Mike Conley now, who, he's not a guy that you necessarily are going to expect him to start shooting 10 threes a game now just because you don't have Karl-Anthony Towns. So it'll be really interesting to see and just kind of follow that subplot. And it's even more interesting when you consider, I guess, the role and expectation difference between what is expected of Jaden and what is expected of Nickeil. and how much better Nickeil has been offensively than Jaden right now. I mean, Jaden is so much more talented than Nickeil is offensively, yet Nickeil has been wildly more effective offensively.
Mm-hmm. Ron, what do you got?
Yeah, the one thing I'll say, and I think you guys might have heard it on the broadcast last night, Chris Finch is trying to make sure the guys stop whining, stop crying about calls. Well, with Cat's absence, I think we're going to see a little bit less whining. We're going to see a little bit less of that. We know Karl-Anthony Towns is a big proponent of that. We know that sometimes affects him getting back down the court. That affects the refs' calls towards him. He's trying to tell the guys, like, stop crying to the refs. Like, they're not going to call it. Even Anthony Edwards last night, like, he did get his shorts grabbed, but he also was fouling. And so it's like, you can't reach and foul and then cry because a guy's grabbing your shorts. You're also reaching, though. So, yeah, the ref's angle, he can't see the guy grab your shorts. It's a foul. Just keep playing. And you can see him kind of laugh it off later. You can see the other guy laugh it off too. Like, yeah, I did grab your shorts, but he didn't see that. Like, it's like, just play the game. It's going to come to you either way. But when you're whining and yelling at the ref, you're forgetting about the part of the game. That's one. Two, in Cat's absence, I think, and I forgot who's, I think Jack might have said it. You are gonna see the ball spread out a little bit more. You're gonna see more just Rudy as one big down low, because Nas, he can spot up and shoot. You got Naw, who can spot up and shoot. You got Mike Conley, who when he gets going is nuts, and you got Anthony Edwards, who with space can create. And now it's less. Cat, we know, can shoot. But we also know Cat likes to play downhill and be in the paint as well. So when you remove one of those pieces, and it might be both, who knows? It might be Rudy Gobert too. Now you really get wide open AAU type basketball, where if you were to go, let's just say Kyle Anderson starting because you want him as a defender, and he's going to replace the Rudy Gobert piece. You just got to have probably Nas come in and play the 5 and deal with some of these centers. So it's going to be interesting to see without Cat down there. But I think for Anthony Edwards, the big thing for his absence now is Anthony Edwards knows there's no question marks now who should get the ball in this moment, who should be the primary ball defender. I don't know if you guys saw that the Isaiah Thomas joined Draymond Green on his podcast and talked about, like, he asked Isaiah Thomas, what do you consider the best point guard? You know, Steph Curry, Magic Johnson, Isaiah. And he said, you know what? He said, the game is different now. The primary ball handler, by definition, is not the point guard anymore in the NBA because of positionless players. And he told Draymond his number of times of bringing the ball up the court, getting the offense started, and assists would technically put him as the point guard for the Warriors, the way the Warriors have him bring the ball up. Now, it could be because whoever's defending Draymond is not an on-ball kind of press the guy at the top of the key guy, so it's easier to just bring it up without trouble. But that's where the game is gone, where you have more guys like Anthony Edwards bringing the ball up, getting the game started. And so you're going to see more of that, where he's the primary ball handler, but then he's going to get it out of his hands quick. Mike Conley has no problem running up the court. He's not trying to get it from the guy and bring it up and say, I'm the point guard. He's just in the offense. And I think without Cat, you're going to see more guys try to find roles within his team and more ball movement, more spacing on the court. But again, less arguing with the refs. And I think that's going to be probably key for them heading to the playoffs, because in the playoffs, refs don't care about you. They don't want to hear this crap, and they're willing to screw you over to help their parlay out. So I know they don't want to – if you piss them off, we've seen like don't act like we haven't seen that baseball video where that dude called 2 strikes that were clearly balls on the ground because he was pissed off at the batter, showing him up and drawing the line. So refs and umpires can be petty. So let's not piss them off so that every single call goes against you, because they could do it if they wanted to. But I think without Cat, the team's going to learn who they are a little bit. And then when he comes back, and who knows how long Rudy's going to be out, then they'll be a formidable force together.
Yeah, we'll get into the refs in our next segment, but let's have Reggie Wilson put a bow on this one.
Yeah, I feel like there's not much to be said past what everybody else said. But, when he missed 50 games last year, I think there was this thought that, like, oh, the Wolves are better, or the Wolves don't need Cat. And then I think, based on what everybody has said before me here, I just think it's so interesting when you lose a guy like Cat, who is an all-star, who, does affect games the way that he does. And now you're talking about multiple people kind of, you might think, oh, well, they can get similar production from Nas, or it'll start with slow-mo or whatever. But I think you kind of see what his absence means to the Wolves. As Ben said, like, they've been mediocre even with Cat being in the lineup. And they've struggled to kind of figure things out offensively. But now you get you get a guy that now is out that you can get consistent threes from. You know, he's a solid defender. You know, he is a still 7 feet, you know, so he is a rim protector as well. So, like, I think for the things that you are looking for from Cat, now you're talking about multiple people kind of filling his role. You know, one night it might be Nah, another night, you know, maybe Jaden wakes up. Another night it could be Slow-Mo, or, you know, there's gonna be different people who have to step up. And then, like Jack said, now you're seeing more volume from a guy like Mike Conley, who doesn't traditionally shoot 10 to 15 times a game. And so, you know, but last night he scored 23, which is very helpful for their efforts. So I think it's an interesting situation that they're in. I think they can sustain as long as Anthony Edwards is consistent, because he is like the X factor with all of this. As long as he's consistent scoring 30, 35 points a game, I think they'll be in a lot of these games. But I mean, look, it is tough when you are down an all-star. And as much as people, you know, want to try to act like Cat is expendable, or, you know, they need to get rid of Cat, like, they can kind of overcome him for a bit. But make no mistake, he is necessary for this team's success.
And Finch mentioned yesterday, too, that they had a lot of experience without him last year that probably taught them some lessons on how to handle this next stretch. Rudy Gobert flashes the money sign and then pays 100 G's to the league. That's next on the Minnesota Basketball Party. And we are brought to you today by Prize Picks. It is America's favorite way to play daily fantasy sports. Over 3 million members. Pick more or less than 2 to 6 stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. It's you against the numbers. And right now it's demon time on Prize Picks. Yes, you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. Turn 10 into 1,000. Demons and Goblins are the new feature at Prize Picks, the newest and most exciting way to play. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts, and that lets you get the 100x winnings with as little as 4 correct picks. You can play right alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players. Meek Mill, comedian Andrew Schultz, they're playing, and you can check out their community plays under the promo tab. They also have injury insurance at Prize Picks, and that might be good to have if you are making an entry with Wolves players right now, because of the way they're going down. If one of them gets hurt in the first half, they will reboot your entry. They're the only DFS platform that does that. So again, you can go multi-sport. You can check out the community tab, get those celebrity entries. So many ways to have fun and win at Prize Picks. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. We're also brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from another retirement account with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, I want your best minute everybody, on Rudy Gobert against the Cavs late in the game with a 1-point lead, flashing the money sign. You've got the game ramifications of picking up a technical foul when you're up one in the closing seconds might have cost him the game. Then you've got just the broader consequences of Rudy Gobert putting the integrity of the game into question. Of course, it was Scott Foster, who's long kind of been, I think, implicated like in subtly with Tim Donaghy. And then he gets fined $100,000 for doubling down after the game. So Jack Borman, start with you. Is this a lot of something, little something, or a lot of nothing with Rudy Gobert?
If you wanted to conspiracy theory it, you could say, well, Rudy Gobert did miss the game after that Cleveland Cavaliers game. Was it a closet suspension? If you wanted to do that, I'm not going to do that. Certainly you wish that Rudy wouldn't have picked up a technical. Especially considering the ramifications it had on the game. But it's hard for them to not feel frustrated after that game. That game was a complete sham job. It was the worst officiated game I've seen all season. I've probably watched 300 NBA games this season or something like that. And it was brutal. But Rudy Gobert, 100 G's for his, officiating, complaining, recidivism after last year in Phoenix, the game Naz Reid broke his wrist. He was outspoken, got fined after that game. So that's why you saw the $100,000 fine. But for Rudy Gobert, he's making $41 million this season. That is 0.24% of his annual salary. If you're making $125,000 this year, that's a $305 fine. If you're making, about $75,000 this year, it's about an $183 fine. So it's not all that much for a guy like Rudy Gobert. And I'm sure that Rudy, as a guy who donates a lot of money to charity, is okay to see that money go to good use for him to be able to get that off his chest with how brutal of a game that was for Scott Foster and Natalie Sego especially.
Yeah, Ron.
Yeah, I get it. It's frustration. It's tough when you feel like that, but yeah, you got to keep your composure. $100,000 though. Clearly to him, he doesn't matter. He got his point across, but it was it worth it? Again, it's going to come down the stretch when you're going to need some of these refs on your side. And I think we've seen the video of Michael Jordan talking to one of the refs, and he's like, man, he fouled me. And he's like, Michael, he didn't touch you. He's like, yeah, he did. He's like, Mike, all right, if you say he did, I believe you. Like that's how you got to do it. And we know Mike was probably gambling on the games too, but he would never have called the refs out. And I think that's the big difference in professionalism and sometimes just being a petty kid. You can't be a petty kid because these grown men as refs, older guys, they will definitely make you pay for it. But it is what it is. It's a learning experience, and he has to move on from it.
Yeah, Reg.
It's funny because betting and sports gambling and all that has become such a part of just the sports landscape that can you blame Rudy for that kind of thinking when he's out there and then doubling down on it? It was bold. I think Rudy probably should keep some of those comments to himself, but I think he probably did it on purpose just to kind of let people know, like, hey, look, I'm not crazy out here. Y'all know that I know that you know that I know what's going on out here. And I think it's not out of the realm of possibility to just think that some of what is happening outside of the game concerning the game is affecting the game a bit. And as Jack said, for the conspiracy theorists, like, they're loving this because they're like, I knew it. And you can't tell me different. But it's just, I don't know. I think it's a tight line to try to dance, and I think Rudy bared the consequences of that, which as was said, like, I don't think he's hurting that much for that fine, but there's some realities to it that I think you'd be naive to think that some of that is not influencing the game. I think you, as a purist, as a fan of these sports and a purist of thought about these games, like, I think you want to believe that that's not the case, but I don't know. It's something to be said.
The Tim Donaghy baggage I mean, that still exists, I think. And in the NBA, where the referees are blowing the whistle, I think more than any other sport, they're probably the most involved on a micro level. I understand the skepticism. I'm looking at a tweet from some guy at JR Borman 13 on Twitter who writes, the Cavs made more free throws than field goals in the second half overtime of that game, 24-16. So they were living at the line. That's a frustrating situation for the Wolves to be in. Ben Beacon finished this one off.
Yeah, not a lot more to add. Obviously, the game ramifications were really bad, and understand how emotional it is in the moment for Rudy, but he knows better and said as much after the game. I think kind of a combo of what Reggie and Ron said, though, like the comments after the game and doubling down and just like, because when it happened, I thought when he did it live, I'm thinking maybe he just means that I think it was Jared Allen flopped here and he's gonna get a flopping fine, because it was right after the Clippers game when Tice flopped and there was a fine, and I was like thinking to myself, maybe that's what he was going for here and he shouldn't be getting a technical. And then after the game, he's like, nope, this is what I said, and this is why I did it, and I mean it, and I'm serious about this. And so that, like, I worry about some longer term subconscious even ramifications with officials that are like, okay, this guy thinks we're cheaters. Because I mean, here's the thing, like, how many refs are there? There's like, I don't know, 100 or so refs that end up reffing in NBA games over the course of a year, something like that. I'm sure there's a couple of them that are influenced by that stuff. I'm sure the majority of them aren't. And if anyone was going to be, Scott Foster makes a lot of sense. We've talked about the Donaghy thing. Like, we could do a whole podcast on that probably. I have no idea how the NBA let him keep officiating games after how implicated he was and all the documentaries that have come out about that whole thing. So yeah, I mean, I worry a little bit about some of that, like, subconscious or perhaps very conscious bias from officials, because the Wolves already, coming out of last year, most technical fouls of any team last season, and already are kind of known. They're not quite to the level of like the Doc Rivers, Chris Paul Clippers in terms of complaining, but sometimes it escalates to almost that level, and this isn't going to help. And so it worries me a little bit, especially with a team that plays so physical defensively and has seen their defensive free throw rate go in the wrong direction over the course of the season. And in the playoffs, a lot of times you can get away with more of that stuff because games are a little more physical in general. There's less whistles, but I worry that this may eat away a little bit at their advantage come playoff time.
And yeah, no team, I think, has more players that tend to rub officials the wrong way right now, like in high profile players too, guys that need to be getting whistles. Edwards, Cat, Gobert, the big three, they all need to be getting these whistles because they have the ball a ton, and I'm not sure that they're in great standing. But we move on to our weekly segment, Predict the Week. Wolves are at the Jazz Saturday, at the Jazz Monday, home against the Nuggets Tuesday in a big second half of a back-to-back. 30 seconds each, starting with Ron. Predict the week. 3 games.
Dun, dun, dun. 2-1. They're going to beat the Jazz twice. They're going to lose to the Nuggets. I think they're going to be 2-1, but I still think you look at the Nuggets having to play the Heat, and I think the Pelicans have to, or not Pelicans, Thunder have to play the Mavs. So I think they both lose those games, which is going to put them in a possible 3-way tie after 3 games.
Reg.
Yeah, I think 2-1 as well. They can beat the Jazz, and then that one against the Nuggets is going to be tough without Cat, especially if the Nuggets have their full complement of stars, and Jokic is he's a train, man. So I think 2-1 probably is the thing.
Ben.
Yeah, I've also got 2-1 with the loss to the Nuggets, and that's mostly like I think the Wolves will I think they've got a shot at splitting the 4 games overall. They've already got a 1-0 lead in the series. But also, by the way, 2 of the last 3 games against Denver Wolves are on the second night of a back-to-back. So in this case, the Wolves are traveling in from altitude in Salt Lake City, traveling home to play the Nuggets, and the Nuggets will have the day before off. So the Nuggets will have the rest and travel advantage, and obviously the health advantage at this point. So I think the Wolves go 2-1 with the loss coming to the Nuggets.
And Jack?
Yeah, I also have 2-1 here. I just think that, the Nuggets have just been rolling, man. 9-1 since the All-Star break. Best record in the league since then. Jokic, Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. all playing really good basketball. And I just think this team has such a good understanding of what they need to do the rest of the season and where they want to go, that I think they'll take both of those games against the Jazz really seriously. And who knows? I mean, the Wolves have done things we haven't expected of them all season long. So maybe they do lose a game against the Jazz and end up getting it back with a win at home.
I think they drop one to the Jazz, who are sneaky good at home, and then they show up for the Nuggets and win in their first game back at Target Center after the road trip. 2-1, but they get the big one against the Nuggets, and they help secure almost that season series win. That's the Minnesota basketball party on Locked On Sports Minnesota today. Wolves talk every Wednesday with a great crew of Wolves experts. Check out the postcasts with Jack Borman and Luke Inman after every single game. 3 days off next time the Wolves play Saturday in Utah. Thanks for watching and listening. Talk to you next week.